the adoption rates were very low. Dhisana means
Awesome, Hari. Welcome. I am so excited for this conversation. Um, I didn't realize we both have a shared history at Microsoft, and just now discovered that our spouses have worked together as well. So
yes.
it's gonna be a fun conversation. Um, I want to start with your background, but first, as the CEO of Dhisana, the name is very interesting. So tell me a bit about how the name came out to be, and then why did you start this company?
Yeah, sure. So again, thanks for having me here, right? And there are a lot of interesting history and journey we have been together across Microsoft and other places. So as we get into that, the main reasoning behind why we came up with this name Dhisana. Dhisana means prosperity in Sanskrit, one of the ancient Indian languages, right? And the root word Dhi means eternal intelligence, right? So our hope is that this wave of intelligence that is going on will bring prosperity to everyone who's involved, basically, right? So it's a lasting intelligence that will make it better for all of us, the community around. So that's the reasoning behind the name, basically. And then value also is that it's not something that is actually going to accumulate wealth for a small set of corporations, but can it bring in prosperity to everyone who's involved. That's the name or the reasoning behind the name when we started off. Background as such, how this started, the current company is I was a part of very early the journey with GitHub's Copilot. So my team was an extended team of OpenAI. We were building the very initial versions of the OpenAI models actually, and then we got what was called as a Codex model,
Mm-hmm.
and we launched that with Visual Studio. This was in 2018-19, where I was with Microsoft and OpenAI, way before all the ChatGPT era. And then we got our initial set of customers. The adoption rates were very low, like 5-10%. Like put in something into Visual Studio, they'll see most of them never used to accept what was there. But at least we got a feedback of what they were accepting, not accepting. And now, if you see, it looks obvious. It's like 70-80% plus, and people vibe coding, right? It was not a state when we started off. Where we could see was the trend line in terms of how useful it is. Right? I got one of the early versions of the model. I put that up and I asked it to write a piece of code, and it came out right. It was like very magical. Right? This was same as I wrote my first Hello World program and it printed something out on a terminal. Right? It's even more magical than that. Then they said there is something onto what's happening here. It's not how we have been building software for a lot of time, and that's the journey started. We released the V1 of GitHub Copilot and even
Mm-hmm.
part of this OpenAI in the Azure ML team. It got adopted into various Office and other systems that were there. And I saw there's a huge value that we have already started seeing in parts of the world, especially code generation, etc. So then one of my previous folks whom I used to work with, Abhay Parasnas, he was the CTO of Adobe. He was starting Typeface. His thesis was that the same thing that's happening in the generative AI space for helping developers, and the same thing can happen for even marketers, basically. Right? A lot of the marketing workflows, content generation velocity can get increased. Then
Right.
join them as their first founding architect, first member of the team, basically, and then build that out. And it's a unicorn now backed by Salesforce and a lot of Google Ventures and has a lot of customer adoption already. That's where I saw that it's not very restricted to some parts of code gen. It has started bringing in ROI for marketing related workflows basically, and creatives can do much better work. Ideation can happen.
What year was this? As in, like when you started seeing the proliferation in the content and data side for AI agents?
So this, I would say around 2023, basically 2022, 2023. So initially, DALI came out much earlier. So we were working on that. But the problem was people wanted something that follows instructions, that's on brand, basically, right, in terms. And even simple things like large organizations used to have just doing simple things like culturalization of a content. You want some content here, put it there. Large team just sitting there and doing it, or format change from X to Y, basically, right? So even if you're not doing a net new content that's going to be into production grade output for ads, there are a lot of these scenarios where you need to transform the content, culturalize them, which was
Right.
helpful. So around that 2022, 23, what we are seeing is those workflows started coming, which was more of generative, right? Now,
Yeah.
then slowly the reasoning capabilities of this model started becoming better, basically. So that's where I saw the transition that it is not just about generating interesting piece of text or image. Now they can use tools, they can reason about content, pick the right tools, call them, etc. Right? Which brings in very interesting probabilities of what you could do. It is not about writing a copy, basically. It's about automating workflows that couldn't have been done before, basically. That's where we started seeing a lot of this transition, at least personally. I was working with some of these early frameworks, including LangChain and all. I had been trying it out from quite some time, but they used to be getting into infinite loops, very error prone. If you make them work on tasks that had more than 4 or 5 tools, it never used to work. But that started becoming better. So then me and my co-founder, basically, who used to work for this company called Streamsets, he has also been in the data and AI space for quite some time, basically, right? So we said that there's a much bigger opportunity, and it's just not about generating content. It's about being able to automate a lot of the workflows and make organizations run in a much more leaner way, basically. So that's where we said this is much bigger than the cloud and AI way which we had seen before, or the cloud adoption that happened. And we said we need to be a part of this journey. So that's where we decided to quit and build something on Dhisana. So we started our journey by seeing where are the places where organizations are struggling currently. One of the main areas, be it large or small, basically, being able to build a predictable revenue pipeline, being able to grow the predictive revenue pipeline in a cost that makes sense is a challenge, be it any size of the organization, actually, right? And it's becoming harder and harder with so much noise in the system, basically, being able
Yeah.
to, the channels are becoming very costly. So every other customer whom I talk to, they have how do I scale and grow? How do I build my pipeline? How do I keep it where I can close, renew my deals, expand? Right? I can hire a army of people, but then it's not a scalable model for them. So that's where we said, okay, let's see how we can help out organizations, especially with building this kind of scalable sales engine or a revenue engine for them. And there, I have been a part of building and doing sales as a part of my previous startup also, basically, where
Oh, so you were leading, like, supporting sales in addition to like engineering leadership at your previous startup?
yeah, so there are two things. Like this is my second term in the startup, right? I my career started with Microsoft. First 10 years, I was a part of the team that started Azure, which was called Red Dog, basically. So
Yeah,
we
I
were,
remember those days.
yes, this was Ray Woolsey and team which built it, right? So this was in early 2000s when we built, and as a part of the cloud wave. So I said, okay, this cloud thing is going to be huge. So I quit, and that was my first venture. It was started in India, right? Where we built
Yeah.
our own startup, and we grew that, and that got acquired and sold. Basically, that's a another story for maybe one of our other partners. But there, I used to also lead part of the sales related efforts, right? So what used to happen there is you hire people, you train them, especially in tech sales, right? For example, customers used to come and say, "Do you have this capability XYZ offering in this cube?" Right? Though you have trained them, quite a bit of time they will say, "No, it's not there." Right? They're not aware, and you train them, get them to a stage. Within a few months, you'll see a churn. Right? Now you again need to restart
Yeah.
the whole exercise with a new set of folks, training them basically and getting there. So same thing I found. I used to be in a part of Microsoft, a team called Commercial Industries. So they used to have a team helping with selling Azure through their partner channels and sales to customers, right? Azure will have ton of these features coming up, some Fubar and Foundry and whatnot, actually, right? What does it even mean for their end customers, basically? The translation, you would be like surprised on even large organizations how challenging it is to enable field to go sell, basically, right? So I've been
Right.
through a journey where I know how getting a sales, especially when where the offering is complicated, being able to train them and being able to pitch is hard, right? So that's where we see a ton of value with AI as we start
Yeah.
looking at these systems, right? They continually learn and improvise and keep becoming better, and they are not going to lose out on the context. So they have the context of the business, the context of what worked, didn't work, the context of the customer, basically, right? So if you set them up correctly, they
Yeah.
can do a way better job in some of the sales and support related functions that are there. And
Yeah.
not the technology that's enabling it, but the problem that we see also in the system. I think in some of these areas, it's going to do way better.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you alluded to is like a lot of us who came from the early Microsoft days, who learned engineering at Microsoft in that era, were exposed to startups within a big company because the entire company was pivoting through the cloud transition. Or for me personally, I got to work on Windows, Intune, and Bing during that era. So now combining that with your AI knowledge, you found your way to the problem of sales productivity, sales enablement, or building predictability in the revenue engine. I think one of the things that's interesting about the CRM market is that it is pretty saturated. There are existing players who've been there for a while. I've been very fortunate to be part of some of these companies. So, what's the core existential problem with today's CRM that you built Dhisana to solve? If you have to nail down that one big problem.
As I was saying, basically, like if given a chance, I wouldn't call what we are building a CRM or an autonomous CRM, basically, because the term comes with some kind of a mental model for people, and when they think CRM, right? The cloud transition was different. Like cloud, what you did was it was not that CRM was not there. CRM was
Right.
there, Oracle, but they had a way where you could package it in an offering like a SaaS kind of an offering, and you put it online. But you're still doing the same work. It was a tool for humans, basically, to get their work done. You go and log what you did, what was the call, who's the lead. But it was all what was done by humans, mostly manually. But it's a system of record of what you're trying to build, and maybe basic workflows you set it up on top of it, basically. But largely, all the traditional CRM tools were tools for humans to go use, basically, right? The fundamental shift that is happening, which requires us to also unlearn and learn, is basically that the systems that we are building now are not tools for humans to use, basically, right? These are all orchestrated by humans, but the tools that are there are for these autonomous agents to go use, basically, right? So, what is happening as a fundamental shift is you're not giving a tool for an SDR to go and log what's happening. You are giving an SDR, which is doing the
Like an
selling.
AI SDR.
Right. SDR again, you could call them basically, but the thing is, the market has got so muddled with email bots, etc. Basically, there's a gradient of what you could do. For us, it is mostly looking at you are doing a lot of these tasks in your organization, scoring a lead, routing them, then engaging them, then looking at a set of deals that are happening, basically, which you couldn't have done with the traditional regex-based workflow or a rule-based system.
Right.
So now the fundamental shift that has happened is these kind of reasoning models allow you to do those human workflows, basically. And when you compose or combine them together, it becomes something that is running autonomously or in an ambient way. Some people call it as a system of intelligence, basically. You could call whatever is there. So what we are building towards is that cognitive stack and a system of intelligence, basically. And at the end of the day, goal is the same. How do you help build a revenue pipeline, grow it for an organization? But the way you do it is fundamentally different. The same analogy I give is when I started with GitHub's Copilot or a Codex, right, in 2019-18. I used to go and tell people, hey, there is this Copilot thing which can write code, basically. Right? People say, no, we already use autocomplete in our Visual Studio. We have IntelliJ.
Yeah.
Well, they don't get it right now. That time, if you go and tell somebody about Lovable or some vibe coding, people won't get it until they have experienced it, basically. How do you compare it with VS Code, basically? VS Code is not same as Codex in any way, basically. The same.
Right.
I'm pretty sure 3-4 years from now, when we have the same discussion, the question of how is it a CRM won't come up because it won't be, it will be a very different system that we are working with, basically,
Yeah.
right?
So, do
So
you go? Please complete.
what I see 3 to 5 years from now is what comes after the CRM. These are all going to be autonomous systems, and what you are interacting with them is just putting strategy and guiding them, basically, and orchestrating and just approving what is required. You won't be doing any of the CRM functionality in terms of what we do today manually.
Right. But in terms of outcomes, you're still chasing the same outcomes, predictability, win-loss ratios, pipeline forecasting, or is that also changing?
So that will also change in some ways, that we look at people as part of a funnel, basically, right? We put them into some kind of a linear workflow. A lead came in and they are going to be qualified, and then they go through this, basically, right? Nowadays, sales is not a very linear pipeline where you move them through stages basically. And we used to do that because there used to be different people sitting in different roles interacting with customers. An SDR does hand over to an EA, will hand it over to some customer success basically. But customer journey is much more complicated. We created silos because there were individuals who are doing that kind of work basically, right? Why do you have to divide a customer through n number of pipelines and
Right.
data silos that are there? Actually, you don't need to. Your customer journey of how they come in, how they purchase. Yes, eventually the goal is how do I increase my revenue basically. But how do you engage your customers, the kind of service you give to them basically, how they use it is going to be way different. And that the organizations that provide better service basically in that way to the customer are all going to see much higher growth compared to the ones that don't adopt it basically in some ways. So you'll start seeing a much better customer experience journey all the way from they entering to their website to adopting your product to being able to use them. And it's not
Right.
like I ask somebody, they'll say, oh, I don't know, my AE will know, AE will say, no, I don't know, my customer success will know, they'll say, oh, I don't know what happened basically. It won't be that way. So one is the buyer part of the journey of the system, I see will be fundamentally different. And again, how buyers are going to make those decisions with personal agents, basically doing the research for them. That's also changing very drastically. So you might need to adapt for those also. So you will start seeing how I'll just go to my chat GPT and say, give me top 5 options for going somewhere. You do the research and
Right.
get back, basically. Right? So you are not visiting some website and searching them, filling forms, asking for an appointment and booking things actually. Right? In those world, how things work, operate, how you sell is going to be very fundamentally different. The organizations have to transform and be able to provide this next level of services, else they'll lose out to the other businesses that are there.
Got it. So building upon that, and but switching gears a little bit, we'll go deeper into the product. And I would like to divide it between three areas: the data foundation, the workflows, whether we call it agentic workflows or just
Mhm.
automation, and then the last part is integrations. So starting with the data model, what's the fundamental difference between having a knowledge-based graph or having a relational database that all of us have worked on through our early years? And how does that change materially the output for a sales user?
There are few key concepts that are there when you build a cognitive store, which is different from traditionally how you build the relational database kind of stores actually. So when you want some outcomes out of a system, an agent to work on it actually, there are elements around your world model has some knowledge, right? There is knowledge that is coming about your product or offering that you're going to sell. There is knowledge that's coming about the customer and this interactions that has happened about over a period of time, basically, right? So it is not about just a pieces of text you are keeping. It's the semantic understanding of what is available there. And that is also layered with the memory, basically. So you came and said, I like cappuccino with double shot, basically, right? I don't need something else. These are all memory that it's building up. You already see glimpses of that in ChatGPT, right? When you say, what do you know about me, the pulse it generates, etc.
Right.
So that system is not a traditional database where you're keeping that information, right? So what it is fundamentally having is a cognitive store with your semantic, procedural, memory, context that is there. And you should be able to retrieve the most relevant information for you to answer the current customer's questions or needs or automatically surface what's important actually. So those stores are going to be very different in terms of how they are structured. And RAG is just, I would say, a first step towards that, the way we are building those stores, right?
Right.
When you actually go and start retrieving content, even with this kind of RAG-based retrievals, basically, you see the error rates are high. Whereas, imagine if you are able to reason about the content, passing them to the model, and where you start getting the outputs, right? Again, you need to create derived outputs, keep them, and use them as a part of your structure. So the how you put it up, how you put up the content will largely determine the outcomes of how well these agents perform, basically. Right? So the data store, you'll see a lot of evolution, and they will be more than just the vector stores that we are seeing as of today in some ways, actually, right? And not because just because of performance or cost reasons, they'll fundamentally
Yeah.
alter the outcomes for you. That's the first part, right? So the second part where you are doing these orchestrations that are there, these models, however good they are, they have their limitations as of today. You give them 50 tools and then say, okay, you go figure out how to get my revenue increased by 30%. Like basically, it
Yeah.
won't work, right? It's still not there. Maybe someday it will, but today what you will need to do is you need to have some kind of an orchestration that will help you lead towards the outcome. It's not very rigid rule-based workflows, but it's still
Right.
not just throw an MCP server with all the tools and say, go figure out basically, right? There is a balance between those two. How do you build those orchestrations? So you need to pick the right kind of abstractions. Like for looking up a record from a CRM, you don't need to go through an MCP and an agent. You know
Yeah.
a record ID, you can figure out what's there. But for being able to score a deal or score a lead based on your intuition on this lead has these characteristics, then go figure it out, right? There, these models can do well. Extracting out structured data out of unstructured data, they can do well. Doing research about account, they can do well. So being able to do this orchestration tightly coupled with the context or the data store, basically, and making it more reliable and not fault or get into loops, etc. Very key part of the architecture. They're not traditional workflows. They are very different on how you help with planning and orchestration of these scenarios, right? So that's where we are building a layer of orchestration that will help you bring in best of both worlds and slowly evolve them towards where they can do very long horizon planning, task execution reliably in production. Models, as they become better, these will also become better. But even with the current state, I think there are a lot of workflows where this orchestration can help and get production ready.
So
The
on the orchestration, I have a follow-up. Had workflow engines prior to LLMs coming becoming mainstream, right? Like we'd had automation tools like Zapier or even simple email sequence builder in Salesforce for a long time. So what's a good example of a fully autonomous sales workflow that an AI agent can manage today, let's say in Dhisana, versus 3 years ago, where it couldn't be done? What would be a good example of this workflow?
For example, imagine a person comes to a website and fills in a form, basically, right? I'm interested in this product. I want to learn more, basically, right? Now you pull in that information and you want to see if this is a high valued customer. Tier 1 customer could be somebody who is from a large ticket account with this organization, decision maker, right? There you want to imagine, score that and send that out to an AE who will call them up immediately or Slack. You send a message, hey, call them, they're interested, right? Or you will tire them and basically, again, this how you figure out if they're relevant. Traditionally you used to do based on some keyword or site. Here you can do a much research and tiring, right? But second level, you imagine if it's an account where you don't have so much volume, where it can automatically send out a most relevant message, right? You are from retail, with healthcare. In healthcare, you are with FUBAR, right? You don't have to engage them all of them in the same way. You can write a message to them where the value proposition is about customer's problem, not about what you are providing, basically, right? So send out those kind of messages which are hyper personalized at scale, basically. So when I talk about personalization, it's about context. It's not about, hey, went to the same college, basically, right? It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's about how are you solving this problem for that customer, basically. Not picking your product saying that I'm giving you a 20% discount for FUBA. But what does it mean for them, right? That value mapping and sending out, you can automate as of today, right? And if he comes back and says, okay, tell me why are you better than this complete FUBA, right? Being able to handle that objection, sending out all the relevant information, it can do it automatically. It can do multi-turn conversations, right? As an example, and take it to a stage where you think, okay, let the real person now start having the conversation, right? This workflow of being able to send, having a meaningful conversation contextually, tiring them, you couldn't have done that before 2023 with any workflow system that you had, basically, right? So that's why I wouldn't call them as the traditional workflows. Traditional workflows where automation of known tasks, bring in a data, transform, do some FUBAR, right? There was no reasoning
Right.
capability, engagement capability that you do today could ever have been done before in some ways.
This again calls for a very robust set of evaluations, like we are discussing before. But going back to developing for sales teams need speed. Revenue operations teams, on the other hand, believes in slight control and guardrails. They want cleaner data, which is it's easier to run analytics on it. So then how do you balance agent autonomy, like you're talking about, fully autonomous agents, allowing them to draft, send, and update records with human in the loop control, especially for users like revenue operations and sales? Like how does that balance work out?
The answer has multiple facets to it, basically, right? One is technology, one is the cultural and the adoption problem that is there, basically, and the model's capabilities itself, right? We piece them
Mhm.
across separately. The first one is, even if models are extremely good, people still don't have the trust that is there with these models as of today, basically, right? For example, even in Tesla, I don't put it on a full system drive and leave my hands out. I still have it fear, basically. The same thing happens with these systems where people are like, oh, good, it's there, but I still don't trust it, right? So where we have in our system the workflows is everything has a human in the loop workflow. We generate all the message, we don't send it out. You
Right.
here is why I have generated the message. Here are the references. You can go validate and send out the message basically. Right? So that has to be there in the initial stages till people
Right.
get comfortable with the system, right? And then slowly they will graduate at some places where they feel it's the right set of systems, right? The second thing, as you said, is selling happens real time. I cannot wait for my data to come back after 2 days where I can answer my customers' questions, basically. Right? So that's where I see these systems make it much better when you're engineering them actually. Right? Traditionally, what used to happen was the systems data are sitting in Gong and CRM and silos and Foobar, etc. Right? And even if you want to bring them together, you will do some ETL, reverse ETL, Foobar. By the time the data reaches, you are like 2 years away in some ways, right? But there are very interesting patterns that are emerging where you can make these agents basically reach out to the data that you want where they are available basically. And even if you don't have tools or access, it can construct the tools or access to retrieve the data that is required. How much discount do I give? Can I give a refund to them, etc. Basically, right? You don't need to bring all of them at one place. If they are structured well, they can work and get the most relevant recent data out of these systems basically, and then help answer your questions actually, right? So we call it as dynamic tool generation, procedural memory, which you can build, then use that to execute once more, etc. Various new techniques that was not even feasible before, where it'll allow you to do this kind of a real-time selling, basically. The one view of the system is how these agents pull in the data and help them with selling. The second part, as you said, actually, right? Once, even in the traditional systems where you have things dumped into Snowflake or your data warehouse, you start looking into content, basically, right? The way we used to do, for example, will this deal go through or not? You forecast a deal, basically, right?
Yeah.
It was all based on input. Did you have, did that come? How, what is the gut feeling say, right? You don't have to completely go for gut feeling now, right? Like here, you have the conversation history logs, basically. You can put it through a reasoning model, which can say, did the key stakeholders even come? Did you sense something where they are having issues, basically? Right? From other deals, what you have learned, what does it look like? You can, like the way you score your lead, you can start reasoning and scoring deals and then use those probabilities to forecast how what do you think is going to happen basically. So even revops are going to find it incredibly useful to come to a much more better visibility into their pipeline than going by gut feel of what people are entering into the system basically. So you'll see a ton of value add they will also see in terms of building these revenue systems and gaining insights out there actually, right? And the thing that will also happen is, yes, they'll be very concerned about guardrails that are there, but there also, if you see currently RevOps, a lot of their time goes on things like deduplicating records, basically, right?
Right.
Mapping field between HubSpot and Salesforce, right? Their lifetime is spent doing all this random tasks, which is not adding to the bottom line in any way, basically, right? All those you need not do, basically. These systems can help you do those much better. You can focus on streamlining the pipeline, building the process, bringing in forecast, which will help you do better, closing the loop in what's happening, why you lost or won, right? So the RevOps role I see they will become like the kingmakers, right? If done well, the role can help create these kind of digital workflows, digital workers for your organization, help orchestrate your revenue pipeline, basically working with the leadership and then setting it up. They don't have to be this side job of cleaning up databases and maintaining your CRM hygiene, right? They can do much more than that. So if you involve them, revenue architects in the right way into your organization, and if they understand how these systems are evolving and working, right, it will be a huge unlock for both of them.
So my takeaway is revenue operations is becoming the king of intelligence.
If
Uh,
they learn, basically, right, they need to unlearn and learn, because I have been to some organizations. I say, why don't you do this, right? Oh, next 6 months I'm going to be cleaning up my CRM and mapping fields between some FUBAR. You can continue to do that, or you can
um,
choose to see how do you reimagine your revenue arc, basically, right?
That is true. And which is why new companies and upstarts have this fresh ground to play in. Now, on that notion, like going into integrations and ecosystem, which continue to be important, what is your integration approach? Is it like banking on MCP servers completely? And then why integration is so important to CRM when you think about like CPQ, billing, document, because it's this entire workflow that orchestrates from front office to back office. So would love to know how you're approaching that.
One of the main things that I see is solving data silos has been a holy grail for people, and I don't think we are nowhere close to that. There are going to be internal, external systems. Data will stay at various places. We'll try to consolidate what's feasible, but it's not all going to be at one location. And you need to meet people where they are working in. So there is going to be email, there's going to be call transcripts, there's going to be CRM, there's going to be internal codes, there's going to be ERP. So it's not going to be that you're able to build everything into one place in real time, have it consistent. It's never going to happen, basically. The main thing that you need to now see is basically how do you orchestrate to your outcomes that you are looking for, basically, right? And the way I look at it is not about plugins to external systems like what Zapier equivalent used to do. Yes, you can fetch some information, but if you are able to structure your integrations in a way where the agents can retrieve the data that they require in the right way, basically. So, for example, I can give the whole table structure of HubSpot or even Power Platform, basically. So here are all the tables. You have full access. You go figure out. And now I say, how much discount can you give? What's the span of a manager? You start asking questions, right? You can try it will fall, right? But if you expose the APIs and tools in a way where the agent can get to its answer, here is a way where you can get to basically the amount of discount you go for a tier one customer. Right? If it has already the constraint, you have created that abstraction, then these integrations are the easiest way for agents to go fetch and do whatever work they need to do, basically. Right? Integrations are important, but I would say they are not going to be in the way we do it today, basically. So they are not record lookups. They are going to be making it easy for agents to look up and build context for getting to their goal, basically. And then you'll see those abstractions happening. And MCP, I keep telling people that I don't know if you worked in decom days, basically, right? Like we used to have a interface. But that's the best you could get, right? It used to be very fragile and poor, but that's the best we had at that point of time. So MCP, similarly, it's a poor man's solution we have as of today. The way we build these systems and integrate the next 3-4 years, you'll see it will be much more evolved than what it is available today. And being able to get that in terms of accuracy and cost also, right? Like, for example, now what people are doing is looking up a CRM record and sending an email. They give all these tools to MCP and do it, right? Imagine if you're doing it for a million records. Each time you're passing this token through LLM, making it infer, basically, your cost and latency, people, if they do their math, they will realize that it just doesn't work out,
It's
basically.
not sustainable unless you pass all the costs down to the customers,
Overtime
which
is
is
good. You pull it through your whole system of record and run this, you will see the bill go through the OpenAI will make a lot of money, basically, but you will be in trouble, actually, right? You need to architect design these integrations well. Integrations are important, but you need to do it in the way that works for this kind of agentic workflows.
Last question on the integration side. I hear a lot about being a system of record versus being a system of intelligence or a system of context. And is there is this a question like A versus B, or do you have to be both in this new era? If you are going into a new market like a CRM, customer service, marketing technology, do you have to have the record as well as the contextual layer, or one is more important than the other or unnecessary?
If imagine I didn't have a baggage, like I start today and I say you can build whatever system, I give you this awesome reasoning model, and you design the systems in a very different way, basically, right? But the truth is, any organization you go to are going to have their Salesforce and CRM, right? Nobody is going to
Right.
throw that away and then start up, okay, let me go do something here. And that's going to be a journey before the transition happens, basically, right? What we will need to do is we need to see how do we use the system that is there already, pull them in, build it in a way where you can unlock value for these customers and then help them with the transition that's there. The full throwaway and come to our new one, though you might be able to build a much better system, it's not going to work currently, right? So even when I was at Dreamforce, I was seeing them changing their CDP to be able to have zero copy workflows, build in additional capabilities which will help agentic workflows run better. I'm pretty sure in Salesforce and other guys will try to evolve their data platform to help these scenarios, and then it may be easier for us to build onto it. But large organizations come with their baggage, so let's see how fast or agile they are able to move. That's there. To unlock the full potential, we need some key capabilities out of these data stores, and at least if those get added, we should be able to start using them actually. The thing in the current form in terms of system of records or how traditionally CRMs have seen, right? They'll say, okay, I'll charge you for some custom fields, basically.
Yeah, and it's a mess because 2 years from its inception, you don't know what the custom fields stand for.
Custom
Some
field stands for,
half of
basically.
them have 20% of the data filled, and then you do a big data cleanup sprint or release, which is all
We should do
about
that, right? So
right.
first underscore name with first space name with first can agents can understand and reason about. You don't have to be buying custom fields from CRM providers with additional money, basically. That was there because maybe you wanted manually somebody to have a labeled field to go enter value. But when you
Right.
start working with these models, they can work with semi-structured data, they can reason about them. So your value add will be somewhere else, not custom fields that you're going to provide in a CRM, basically, right? So they will be good, reliable sources of database, basically, but all the bells and whistles they used to give on top of it, like these custom properties, etc. I don't know how much of it will still be required. You'll rarely go there to actually go enter values and fill forms. They will be just stored with the right governance and audits in place to make sure who can accessing it, not necessarily a way to send out form filled data back to them.
So a lot of this sections carry away for me is it will boil down to what kind of new data store architecture emerge over the next 2 to 3 years. How is access to them democratized? But then that creates a big question of, and we are moving into the go-to-market area, like what's the moat? Like how will new companies stick? So on that note, like what's your ideal customer today? Who do you think can come in, has a propensity to change, and can use Dsana to change their business model for more predictable revenue operations?
For us, we have been primarily focusing on teams that have B2B sales and also complex sales process, right? They could be selling through partner channels, they could be selling through various mechanisms, and they have very deep down complex workflows. How do we help scale these teams is where we'll get to. And where we have seen is there are pockets or teams where the leadership understands that it is critical for them to go make this transition, right? More than technology, I guess the challenge is buy-in from leadership where they think that it's a journey. It's not that they'll get to it today, but they have to start on the journey, basically. If they don't do that, it's going to be hard 3 years from the line, suddenly you'll change, right? So we have a bunch of those customers who understand the value that it can bring in, basically. And they now work with the team, identify pockets where they can bring in value immediately, help build that out actually. So these will be organizations where they have leadership in sales, CROs who are there basically, who understand what is available. We haven't still entered into large enterprises because it's very slow in both
The
adoption
deal
and
cycle.
insights, right? But anywhere in the mid market, B2B, where they understand the value that it's bringing in, we are seeing customers want to work together, get some of these pilots running basically for them, and they started to see value actually, right? And once they start seeing success, then they want to try out more in some ways. So that's where I think it will happen two phase. One is education and being able to have that buy-in and belief. That I think is becoming better with all the OpenAI and folks also helping build out more reliable systems and spreading the word. On the other part of technology being able to identify, I think now we have already started seeing customers finding value in the segments that we are working in.
What's a recent customer success story? And I'm looking for the use case that they use Dsana for, where they've found immediate value.
So, for example, one of the customers where they have not just the outreach data, right? They have data about how people are using their product, basically, right? And they come in and they use it somewhere, they get stuck somewhere, basically, and they are not able to move forward. Now they had to sit there manually, go what was happening in the system, then reach out to them saying that how can you help, or you can do this XYZ, basically. And once they reach a stage, then they send out a thing saying that we want to upgrade, right? So you need to be able to do this workflow of people who have signed up, basically, to be able to unblock them, and then at the right point being able to get them to upgrade to what we have, right? So that requires some kind of reasoning with their first party data, the customer's data, and what they're trying to achieve. So they were able to get those automations running, and now they're able to scale up much faster. It used to be a lot of manual tasks looking at their product usage data, what customer is trying to do, and then you go earlier than what was required and ask for money, they will churn, basically, right? First, you need to unblock them before you get to those places, right? So people have been implementing some of these very interesting workflows. Similarly, there are places where, as I was saying, these sellers need to resell somebody else's product, right? Like they're very
Right.
complicated product. So they enabling their field to be able to do that. Now it's much easier. What they need to send, etc., is already there. They just need to review and send it up, right? So again, those folks where there is a complex product to sell in terms of its capability, especially tech sales that's there, right? They are finding incredible value where they're selling some of this complex products. So the customer success is not just about, as I was saying, sending out some auto-generated email. If you're able to bring in the right context and enable this workflow, you start seeing customer adoption conversion being much better. So bringing your data about your product, your service offering, your customer, the renewals that are coming up, how your tickets have been read. Like, more you can bring in either new capabilities or upsell, cross-sell, you can do a much better job in some ways.
So in this model, do you act as the forward deployment engineer and there is someone from the customer side who has an FTE role, or is this a IT team? Like, how does that work out?
Since we are initial phases basically, right, as an industry, we need to white glove basically the customers. Though we have a product, not just us, I've seen including OpenAI to folks from Salesforce. Now the realization is it was not like come sign up, put in your credit card and start using it basically.
Right.
So now understand the customer problem and enable it. So we have a team which sits with them, understands their problem, helps them design for it basically. And in that process, we're also making the product better where they can do it themselves. So we have the equivalent of what we call actually, right, to sit with them. The customers, once they believe in it, requires both the folks who understand what they are doing currently to be able to automate, right? The playbooks that you need to put, what is the strategy, what is the orchestration you're doing, and the RevOps team equivalent or the GTM engineers equivalent, right? Who can come in and translate that into an implementation that runs. So both have to be there who are involved in terms of here's the outcome I want, here's what I'm doing currently, basically. Can you encode them into the automation of the agents? We'll say yes, it's feasible, not feasible, is it realistic? Then work with the team which has access to their CRMs or current set of tools, basically, right? And help them also understand. Our goal is set it up in a way where their internal team, the RevOps, GTM engineers can run it on their own. But that initial phase of 4 to 6 weeks, we'll need to get that up and then maybe fine tune it a bit.
Got it. And are these like paid pilots or they are open pilots where you want to help the teams drive outcomes?
The initial pilots that we are doing are all open pilots, basically. Some of them converted, but where we are currently doing is let's get to outcomes first. Are we able to
Right.
show you value? Because it's still in a very early stage, right? Not just for us, the whole agent space is basically in early stage. For us also, the learning is very important. It's working, not working, right? So these are all open pilot. Few of them converted. Other ones we choose where it matches what we want to do, then get them. So we have a free version where some of the small startups can try on their own. We spend a lesser amount of time basically, but the bigger ones we make sure we can get them to see the ROI basically before we start.
That's a very streamlined process. I think we're very outcome driven process that you've adopted. So now switching gears in the closing sections, I know Dhisana is new, but what has been the most challenging technical hurdle or architectural hurdle that you had to solve while building the product and the platform?
The main issue with this systems is we know they will become better basically.
Right.
Models will become better, right? I've seen that from 2019 where early versions of Codex to ChatGPT and all the trend line, right? It's not there today, right? But we have to build something with this, but I don't need to, I shouldn't be in a place where I'm throwing away the whole thing and rebuilding it, hopefully. How do I build a system where if the model becomes better, my product becomes better automatically without having to do a lot of resurgery into the system is one of the key challenges. A lot of the AI native startups that's going to be there, basically, like being able to have a balance basically where I'm able to quickly adopt every other time there's a new framework model pattern. Basically, how can I assimilate and bring the value to the customer quickly? I guess that's where one of the key challenges will be there. The second thing will be around being able to have the right cognitive store and context engineering in place so that
Mhm.
the outcomes start becoming better. Actually, I guess those two, if you are able to at least initially get it right, then you can build on top of that foundation, building very interesting deep domain workflows.
Got it. Last question, like last lesson. What's like table stakes in AI CRM or AI native CRM, autonomous CRM, whatever we want to call it, that everyone will soon consider, oh, this should be part of the deal, versus what's a true differentiator for new companies? Because customer expectations keep going up every quarter as opposed to every few years. And then everything is becoming table stakes, whether it's agentic automation or human in the loop or an intelligent routing system. So, what's the differentiator versus table stakes as you see it in the next few years?
So every other legacy provider is going to have a chatbot that will pop up next to your lead or an account, actually, right? Where you can ask questions, like we call it Copilot or chat pilot or whatever, basically, right? So you'll see everyone's the easiest entry point is I put up a chat with my content equivalent, basically translate them into queries and it answers interesting. I'm not saying it's bad, it brings in value, basically. So that everyone has to have, and they can then tag themselves as AI enabled CRM basically, right? So that I think you'll start seeing, and some workflows around summarization, being able to draft a email copy, those kind of capabilities, right, with AI. will start coming in all this, right? So all the legacy providers will provide it. That's there. But as I was saying, 2 3 years from now, none of those systems will exist basically, right? Like we need to build for the future. Though we start with what's available, these systems have to be something that is built for autonomous ambient agents. So in these applications, the key is going to be human in the loop workflows, guardrails, getting visibility into why it's working the way it is, tweaking them to make sure it works reliably. And you are the orchestrator, approver, reviewer, basically. You are not a manual data entry operator, basically, workflows. So the experiences of these apps, you need to build towards that, while the legacy players will start adding chatbots to their existing.
Right. Okay, so chatbots are core and table stakes, but having a really modern user experience that builds off of what consumers are using with LLMs today is going to be setting the stage apart. Great. I have three AI questions that are going to be rapid fire. So let's do 30 seconds. Number one, outside of Dhisana, what's the one AI tool you cannot live without?
It's been ChatGPT for me. It's like
Is that
the
your go-to LLM provider, both from a modeling, like for from a coding perspective and as a personal
yes,
assistant?
we use codecs from them quite a bit. Basically, that's the coding part of it, and this one for basically drafting. And I have built a bunch of the workflows, except GPTs before, and now agentic workflows. Right, I use quite a bit of them. So that
I got to test out Codex because I'm still on Cloud Code. I feel like I've
so
not
given
been able to cross the chasm.
it's all been open AI co-wallets. You can call me back, but it's like my baby in some way, right? So
Second question, are you seeing a shift towards smaller fine-tuned models for specific sales use cases, or the future is still like large generalist models?
we will have smaller models basically, but the current ones are not working in some ways actually, right? The large models are very costly, operationally heavy, and they encode a lot of world knowledge which is not required ideally. I know internally how many GPUs they consume for running, etc. Basically, right? So we will get to smaller models, but not currently. The problem is they lose their capability to be able to do the tool calling capabilities around what I need as outcomes. Though they work, generalization is hard basically in some of these models. So I think maybe we are 3 to 5 years away before we start seeing smaller models being able to perform, which we can make it operationally ready. There are segments for transcription and few things which you can use for basically, which will reduce the cost for you, but you'll still largely be dependent on some of the bigger models and maybe fine tune them for your work.
What's your take on RL? Are you pro RL? It's also one of my specialization topics at Stanford. So, are you pro RL? Are you anti RL? What camp are you in?
The current state of RL, like what you call as RL today in the industrial data work, it doesn't work basically. It's very costly and the way it's there. Also won't get you to the next stage basically as they're there. Right? I think it's going to be a new architecture which gets the learning from these two basically. You should be able to adapt and learn, not just imitate on what's happening in real time basically and have that loop. But you also have to have your underlying world knowledge of how to operate, which one to pick and work from basically. I think we're going to see a very interesting mix of these two systems that will be there. As I always seem like people pick the best of the patterns from each of these. RL has its
Right.
strengths, large language models have their strengths basically. So we are going to see a hybrid system that will evolve, which brings in both of them actually.
Got it. Awesome. So, now that we're closing this great conversation, and I feel like there's been so many nuggets I personally have to go back to delve deeper into, and maybe we'll do a round two. Where can people follow your work, get access to the Sana, or even try out the product if it's available for small business on the website?
We have a way where people can sign up on their own. So what is available there is just a part of what we were describing as a vision, right? You can get something started where you can do few of these workflow automations and all running. Our roadmap is to go help build this autonomous sales engine, but today we can start there. We have a bunch of pilots also going on. They can reach out to me. I'll share my LinkedIn information, right? So once they can connect, we are working on some very interesting problems for organizations where we are helping them reimagine how they do the sales workflows, right? So if they're interested in partnering, I would be more than happy to work with some of these organizations. As I said, this is not the, this is going to be a decade of innovations that's there. It's not a week or a month that's going to be there, right? So it's a journey. And My recommendation is, if you haven't started, you should start basically early. I know there are a lot of hey, this LLM doesn't work, right? So I'd say when you're baking something, right? If you look at the process of making a cake, you'll see batter and something. You'll say, oh, no, it's not a cake. It's not going to taste good. But once the outcome comes in, you realize that it's there, right? So we are still in this cooking process where you're building things up, and eventually we will have the cake. It will be good, basically, right? You need to have that belief, come in, start that process of cooking or baking, and you need to understand that, else it will be, you'll miss out on that journey.
Yeah, so don't miss out. Go to dhisana.com, DHISANA.com, and you can ping Hari or me and reach out if you're looking for an autonomous or modern CRM. I don't know what the right thing is, system of intelligence. But if you're looking to do more with AI and bring predictability in your revenue operations, that's the place to be.
Yes.
Thank you for
If you
joining
want a
us.
leaner, smaller, better sales organization and help sales skills, we are always there to help. And again, it was amazing talking to you, Purvi, and lots to catch up on. I'm sure we'll have more of these in the future, and we'll look back and say, oh, that was early days.
Absolutely. I feel like we've already had deja vu on our Microsoft days, and that's what Firgun Talks is all about. It's actually a Hebrew word. I know we started with the meaning of Disana. Firgun in Hebrew or in Jewish culture means to be able to feel happy for someone else's
Oh.
success. So that's all this is about. And yeah, thanks for joining us. And let us know if you have more questions. Reach out to Hari or me.